2 years ago, Picaspree released a video in which he beat Pokemon Red using only a Ditto in battle. That had me thinking, can it be done with every other Pokemon? So that's the challenge I've been doing on and off for the past 2 years. I try to make the rules similar to the rules in Picaspree's challenge, with a few adjustments. Because I have to beat the game 81 times, I'll be using an emulator which allows me to change my starter at the beginning of the game fairly fast, as well as allowing me to speed up the game, because, 81 times. Although the sheer amount of Pokemon makes this challenge very tedious, it doesn't really make it difficult. After all, Picaspree beat the game with only a Ditto, which can't learn TMs or HMs, and also without using items in battle. So let's level the playing field as much as we can. No items in battle, and no TMs or HMs. And let me tell you, base movesets in Generation 1 are bad. I'm not going to cram all 81 runs in one video, mostly because I haven't finished all 81 runs, but we'll go through the first 30 and cover the rest in the second part. These will be the grass types, the fire types, the water types, and the bug types. Grass type Pokemon all get Sleep Powder, which is a very strong move that allows you to basically beat any battle. This is because in Generation 1 Pokemon who are asleep take a full turn to wake up, meaning that if you're fast in them you can potentially keep them asleep forever. Fire types and water types have more reliable stab moves though, but fire types do get better secondary moves than water types, making this challenge a little bit easier for them later in the game. Bug Pokemon all play quite different to each other because of the lack of bug type moves. In fact, only Beedrill gets a strong bug type stab in Twineedle. However, Butterfree, Venomoth and Parasect do get Sleep Powder, which as we've said, is very strong. Scyther and Pinsir don't get any of those things, but they do have the best stats out of all the bug types. We'll see how these poor little bugs manage later in the game. At the beginning of the game, we get approached by a strange old man, who says he'll give us a Pokemon if we follow him quietly to his house. After that, the very start is quite lenient. We're allowed to lose our first rival battle, and the second one is completely optional. We don't even have to face any trainers until we face a bug catcher with a level 9 Weedle. Only Paras really struggled here, and that was only due to his 4-time weakness to Poison Sting. Weedle. He's already faster than me, just from the get-go. I am slower than a level 4 Weedle. Ow! What the f- The first problem comes when we get to Pewter City. We're not allowed to progress in the game until we beat Brock, who has a much higher level Pokemon than we do. Brock is a breeze if you have any effective moves because of his Pokemon's bad movesets, but the problem is a lot of Pokemon just don't have any moves that are effective against rock types this early in the game. Normal type moves like Tackle and Scratch are very common but barely do any damage because of Geodude and Onix's high defense. And status moves like Poison Powder or Sleep Powder do nothing in this fight because for some reason, Brock is the only trainer in the game with an infinite supply of full heals, which he uses on the same turn you afflict the status conditions, because yeah, the AI can do that. We only have a handful of trainers available, so how do we level up? Just beat up a few hundreds of Weedles and Kakunas in Viridian Forest. We need to level up until we either learn an effective move, or until our stats are high enough to simply take the fight head on. These Pokemon give from 20 to 60 experience, and leveling up requires a lot more than that. So yeah, the TLDR is, if you have any effective moves early on, you're fine, otherwise you'll have to spend a few hours grinding in Viridian Forest. Now that we're done with Brock, we get access to a bunch of trainers, meaning a lot of easy EXP. Our third rival battle in Cerulean can be a bit tricky, especially with his Pidgeotto spamming Sand Attack, making us miss a lot during the rest of the battle. But it's completely RNG whether he uses Sand Attack or not, so all we need to do is try a few times and we'll get through it. Misty is pretty darn strong due to having a Starmie at a fairly high level, but we can do this fight later if we're struggling, which is usually the case for fire types as well as some water types. Now we start to get really over leveled. The rival fights are easy, same with the other gym leaders. Their Pokemon either have terrible movesets or just aren't high enough level to compete. There is, however, one place of interest, which is the Pokemon Tower. We have to go through it to clear the game, and to do so we have to fight a few ghost types. This can be a mild inconvenience for some, but then there's Scyther. Challenge failed. No, seriously, Scyther doesn't learn any move that can hit ghost types, and even Struggle can't hit them in Generation 1. Scyther cannot beat the game under our current rules. Well, what about this? If he can beat the game with only one TM, he gets some sort of consolation trophy. The catch is he can only use that TM against ghosts. It makes the rest of the game a little bit harder because he only has 3 moves, but at least he gets to participate. Which TM should we teach him? Wow. He doesn't have any offensive move that hits ghosts. Well, he does have Mimic. We could use one of Gastly's moves against him. Oh, it's only available after clearing the Pokemon Tower? Well, it looks like we're gonna have to do this the hard way, with Bide. For some reason, despite being normal type, Bide still works on ghost types. I have to get very lucky since I rely on what he does rather than on what I do, and I have to hope that Gastly uses Nightshade and doesn't hit Confuse Ray or paralyze me with Lick. Eventually it does happen and we can move on. There's not much else to talk about in the Kanto region, so let's skip forward, right after beating the last gym. We have traveled across the land, searching far and wide. We have taught our Pokemon to understand the power that's inside, and we are now ready to face the Elite Four. But before that we have to take on our rival. This time his team's actually pretty tough. They don't always go down in one hit, and his starter actually hits you pretty hard, for sometimes over half your HP. Finally, we are getting some serious fights in the game, where we can't just mash A and actually have to think for a second. Blue has a lot of different types, so he usually has 2 or 3 Pokemon who can hit you with super effective moves. However, you are still faster than all of them due to your level, and you should be strong enough to make it through this battle. Only Beedrill really struggled here. After a quick tour of Victory Road, we can take on the final bosses of the game. Lorelei isn't usually too hard. Her Pokemon are quite bulky and will hit you with water and ice type moves, but her Jynx and Lapras are the most problematic ones. Jynx can freeze you or put you to sleep, which is very bad, while Lapras can hit you very hard with Hydro Pump and Blizzard, or even paralyze you with Body Slam or confuse you with Confuse Ray. But usually every Pokemon can outlast the fight. Moving on to Bruno. This fight isn't really a challenge for everyone due to the abysmal movesets on his Pokemon. I'm pretty sure Weedle could clear this fight without even using items in battle. Agatha, on the other hand, is fairly hard for a lot of Pokemon. They can all inflict you with strong status conditions, but they can't really hit back very hard. You basically just need to deal enough damage to one-hit KO most of her Pokemon or get a bit lucky. Lance has Pokemon with really good stats but with pretty poor movesets. His Gyarados is pretty strong, while his Dragonair and Aerodactyl can status you or chunk you down. However, his Dragonite tends to spam moves that do no damage, like Agility or Barrier, which makes the fight a little bit anticlimactic. Finally, we face Blue again. Some of his Pokemon have gotten stronger, but some have also gotten weaker due to worse moves. That's the case for Rhydon, Exeggutor, Charizard, and Venusaur. Unfortunately for our rival, Charizard and Venusaur were usually the ones that made battling him hard, so this final battle is not quite as challenging as you might think. Still, due to only having their base movesets, a lot of Pokemon have specific struggles. So let's go over the Pokemon that I've covered so far. For grass types, Venusaur and Victreebel one-hit everything with Razor Leaf, and the others can just rely on Sleep Powder if needed. Charizard being 4-time resistant to grass and having Fire Blast should have made this difficult, but Sleep Powder works just fine. Fire types have very strong move in Flamethrower that can kill any Pokemon in the Elite Four in 2 hits or less. Moltres and Rapidash don't get Flamethrower, but they both still get Fire Spin, which, although less reliable than Flamethrower, still allows you to take down enemies without getting hit back, which is enough to deal with the Elite Four. Water types all get very similar movesets, mostly relying on Hydro Pump or Water Gun. Lorelei can be a little bit of a drag due to her Pokemon's resistance to water moves, but you can easily take care of her as well as the rest of the Elite Four if you're high enough level. For the bug types, Butterfree and Venomoth get Psychic type attacks, which are very good for taking on the Elite Four. Beedrill gets Tornadle, the only good bug type stab in the game. In Generation 1, surprisingly, bug type moves are super effective against poison types, so Agatha is not quite as difficult for the bee as it looks on paper. Parasite gets to use Spore, a 100% accuracy version of Sleep Powder, as well as abusing badge boosting with Growth and cutting everyone down with Slash. Scyther also gets to use Slash, but to deal with Agatha I did have to switch Bite for Mimic. For Bite to work I would have to tank 6 Nightshades, which totals to 342 damage. At level 100, a Scyther with perfect DVs and fully trained EVs has exactly 343 HP. So although it's just barely technically possible, I already knew my Scyther didn't have perfect DVs, and I had a much easier alternative in Mimic, which allowed me to just use Nightshade on ghost types. If you look at Pinsir's moveset, you might think he doesn't have any move that can hit ghosts. But despite being fighting type, Seismic Toss actually does work on ghost types. For the rest of the Elite Four, you can simply use Sword Dance to do massive amounts of damage. Once our rival's starter Pokemon loses the last of his remaining HP, we have done it. Well, at least until we start the game again with the next Pokemon on the list. And that's what I'll be doing for the next couple of months on twitch.tv/Rion8, so that I can actually complete the challenge and wrap things up in part 2.